Well, we are here today on the Gravity Podcast with Rick Ricart. Rick, it's great to have you on. I've been following you and watching what you're up to, and love the energy. And I know there's a lot of depth there that I'm excited to hop into. So thanks for taking some time.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here, Brett. Thank you for having me. Obviously, what you're doing with not only the real estate, but with the podcast and the city of Columbus and how we're growing, it's awesome to connect with the like-minded leaders and continue to take what positive energy we can and inject it into this city to keep it growing the right way. And you're right, you start peeling back the layers of the onions, and there's a lot of steps and processes that come together to find positive energy in situations.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with your early days, your childhood, and your family upbringing. You come from a family that has been in the public eye, family members, including yourself, on television, and people probably only know a little piece of that, maybe even don't even know what they think they know. And so let's talk about your childhood and your family, and a little bit about your parents and your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was born in 1979 in Canal, Winchester, Ohio. Actually, I was born in St. Anne's Hospital when it was just outside of downtown Columbus. But my parents were both from Canal, Winchester. Sorry. My dad, Fred, was from Canal, went to high school there. He went to college at Case Western in Cleveland, which is always an interesting tidbit to throw in there because he was a biochemistry major that then obviously outside of college became a car dealer, which wasn't not a normal transition. My mom, born and raised in Canal her whole life. My grandparents had the little restaurant in Canal, Winchester. The Wigwam Diner is still there today with my grandma's old recipes. So there's a lot of connections to that town. But I was born there, moved to Gahanna, actually Blacklick, when I was in kindergarten, and spent the rest of my childhood there in the Windrush Creek neighborhood, which was awesome because I got to grow up with that life of there was, friends my age in my neighborhood with me, still best friends with those guys. Shout out Tim and Casey, and kind of growing up together. And I grew up in a big house also. Blessed to have two parents that are still married to this day, still madly in love with each other to this day, which just kind of whatever my mom wants to have happen there. But and I have three siblings myself, or four, I'm sorry. I have three sisters and a brother. So growing up in a house where I was the oldest boy, kind of all the girls were around me in age, my brother 8 years younger. I actually got to grow up doing a lot of things with my father. And I spent a lot of time with my dad on weekends. We grew up doing motorsports together, easiest way to put it, whether it was dirt bike riding, go-kart racing, cars in later years. But whatever weekend hobbies and activities that he was into, he always took me with him, which I think is really cool now because I have a 5-year-old son. And I look at that and I'm like, I don't want to just go ride my motorcycle this weekend with my friends and cousins when leave him at home, right? When do I start bringing the kids in? What also is cool about that is he never talked business. Growing up, I didn't have any clue what my dad did, which made it even more confusing because he was on TV a lot. Like in the 90s. So in 1990, I turned 10 years old and my dad's on every commercial break. And, it carried on through all of the 90s, and he wrote his songs and did, parodies of songs and played guitar and I grew up in a house where those songs were always being played. And he would want to know what I was listening to at the time because whatever was popular, he tried to change the words, put it into a car jingle, put it on TV. And back then the internet didn't exist. Speed of legal wasn't where it is today. He could let a song run on TV for 6 weeks before a cease and desist letter would come from Aerosmith and say, get that off the air. By that time, the damage was done. Enough people saw it, the ad worked. So I grew up in a house that had a lot of music also. Music was always a big thing. My dad and I would either be talking science. Only grades he cared about were math and science. The subjects that taught you how to think. You have to learn how to learn and learn how to think. and everything else you'll learn outside of school.
Let me hop in there for a second. So, because
Yeah.
this is great, I was wondering, what was it like, when you said your dad was Fred, which, I knew the family, but I wasn't exactly sure, who was your father. And so I remember Fred Ricart. I mean, I grew up in Columbus, and I was in high school in the 90s. I graduated in 93. So like I remember that really well. We're dealing, and your dad was like a big personality on television all the time. And, in hindsight, I don't think I really understood this at the time, but brilliant. Like, I mean, he was brilliant and the business was booming. I mean, I remember, that's my, recollection of it. I don't actually know the economics, but I mean, the growth was massive. That auto mall off of Bryce Road, that was like big deal. You didn't see things like that. It was way ahead of its time. And so I'm curious, about two things that you've already said. One is that your dad didn't talk business. And then two, what at some point, you're old enough to connect the dots. He's on TV and he's talking about selling cars. So, and the name's on the door. So, you figure this out. And what was it like to have a dad that was such a big personality in this town?
Yeah. I mean, having a dad with big personalities wasn't really a plus. I'll kind of put it that way. Yeah, it made it cool because he did try to put himself everywhere. I mean, he was big. If there was a stage he could jump on, he was getting on that stage, and he was getting in front of a microphone, and he would grab his guitar as a reason to get up there. And before, I mean, if Facebook was invented in 1990, he would have been the first person with 10 million followers. I mean, he was everywhere. Kind of how I like to be places with a lot of intention and purpose, and not just kind of everywhere like his theory was. And it's harder today too. There's so many different forms of media and omni-channel marketing. You can't possibly be everywhere anyways. That made it pretty cool. I also remember, I played football. I went to Columbus Academy in Gahanna. And I remember going to the academy locker room as a freshman, and seniors football team, we're singing the jingles, singing the songs, and I got a lot of teasing because of it, right? I got a lot of that, like the prank phone calls at home. What made it 10 times worse is when I was about 14 years old, my dad and I were out riding dirt bikes. We were racing motocross, and he missed a jump and he broke his wrist. And I had to throw him in an old pickup truck and drive him to the hospital. And sucked that he broke his wrist, but even worse, he couldn't play guitar on TV. So he convinces my mom to come do the singing and dancing on the TV commercials, which then she became a staple, which then that created this whole other element of celebrity and fandom and weirdos that came out of the woodwork. And eventually is why my parents in 2001, they moved to South Florida, and they lived there for 15 years until they moved home recently back to the Columbus area. But that was one of the big kind of factors was it grew to the point where, from a local celebrity standpoint, my parents were on the top of the list, and that was pretty obnoxious. At the same time, I got to watch and observe and learn a lot of things, and meet some good people and have some cool opportunities when there were concerts that they were promoting, or even like Red, White, and Boom. And they would do a big event with the parade with Red, White, and Boom. And when the Santa Maria was down on the river, he would do an event there, but somehow we got to watch the fireworks on that ship. Like that kind of stuff was really super cool also. From a business standpoint, I would have to come to the dealership to like swap cars and stuff when I was 16 and some of that stuff. But generally he kept us away. And I think he did that because my grandfather, who started the business in 1953, he slept and drank the business, right? He was there all the time. He would come home for dinner and have dinner with his family and then go back to work to finish for the night and drive the wrecker. And this was back in the late 50s in Canal Winchester. So I think my dad didn't like that part of his youth. In fact, he told me that. Like, my dad always brought work home, and that kind of annoyed him. So he didn't want to do that. And that was a really cool lesson to learn from also, because as we're figuring out work-life balance as we become adults, figuring out how to cut that off and create the divide between work and home is extremely important.
Mhm.
But at the same time, yeah, it was super, made me really curious, fueled this curiosity inside me, because like my dad, who I love and he's awesome, he's sitting next to me and we're driving down the road, is also like they're number one in the world in something. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? What is that thing?
Mhm.
And he didn't even like brag or talk about that. But yeah,
Mhm.
they were the number one volume Ford dealer in the world, selling 20 to 30,000 new Fords out of here a year. It was crazy.
Wow. Wild. Yeah. I mean, interesting. There's a lot there to unpack. I get the kind of fame piece and how the kind of being in the public eye could become a real challenge and burden, and it could even become overwhelming and hard. And yet, for you, it's got its own kind of sounds like it had its own kind of flavor of that, and that there's the teasing and there's the like can't really get away from this kind of thing. But there's some fun too, right? I mean, there's some good perks that come with that. And it sounds like your parents were like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they were like pretty damn good at like trying to do this right,
Yeah.
to keep you shielded from it, and to some degree to have balance, to go out and do fun things together, and show you how to step away when it becomes too much. I mean, it looks like there's just a lot of good learning and role modeling in your family.
Oh yeah. And looking back now is, dad, myself, and I have three little kids, and I look back and I'm like, man, they were really good parents. Like
Yeah.
I kind of feel bad because I was hard on
Hmm.
them. My
Hmm.
sisters and I were hard on them. I mean, my sisters wanted everything, and I wanted to do everything.
Hmm.
And I just was always, and I still am. I'm on the move a lot.
Hmm.
I'm sitting in an office now because I'm on the phone with you, but the or computer with you, but generally as soon as we're done doing this, like I'm up and I'm out of this building. And
Hmm.
I'm moving to somewhere else. I'm not a desk
Hmm.
sitting kind of person. So I was always wanting to move, and I gave them a hard time, but they really did. I think the thing I learned from my dad most about parenting is he really prioritized certain things. Like there were some kind of non-negotiables and kind of just some rules and boundaries that he was very serious about. But everything else, he was really cool. I
Hmm.
mean, I just think back to the high school days, wanting to go out on weekends and this and that. And he wanted to be in bed by midnight and have the alarm set.
Hmm.
And you could actually stay out past midnight if you wanted to, but you couldn't come home.
Hmm.
And it was like, to some kids, I may be like, oh, that's awesome. You're like, go out all night. Like, no, actually, I kind of like to sleep in my bed. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of want to get up to mom making breakfast, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he taught us how to kind of follow some of those rules and stuff, but also have freedom.
Hmm.
And so yeah, you think back to some of that kind of parenting stuff. At the same time, um, we're always hard on us about school.
Hmm.
And I mentioned the math and science part. When I mean math and
Hmm.
science, he expected A's in math and science.
Hmm.
He used to drop us off at school and tell us that 99% is total failure.
Hmm.
100% is the only way. Now, I just teased him the other night. I'm like, that was pretty pretty serious to a kid, thinking that there was nothing acceptable below 100%.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
fortunately for me, I wasn't a good kid in school. I wasn't great with the book smarts, and
Yeah.
I wasn't getting A's in anything for a long time. It also
Yeah.
made me realize that I'm not going to make him happy when it comes to this. I got to figure out what makes me happy and what I want to learn. And I
Hmm.
became one of those students that whatever book was assigned to be reading that time, right? I wasn't reading that book, man. I was
Hmm.
maybe getting the cliff notes. I was maybe
Hmm.
asking my sister if she had read it the year before. But I was reading whatever book I chose to pick out of the library and read. It was just, that was
Hmm.
always the way my brain kind of worked. I
Hmm.
wanted to learn the things that interested me. I
Hmm.
didn't really
Yeah.
care about the things that interested you.
Yeah.
Which
Well, I was
each
gonna,
their own, which is kind of the way it should be. But
yeah, I want to actually come back to the things that interest you, and kind of how that may be similar and different than your dad. But tell me before we do that, what happens then? Like, I get, high school, academy, football, you're kind of staying away from the business, but obviously aware of what's going on. Where do you go from there? I mean, you talked about, school and your academics
Yep.
and, I was probably a lot like you as a student. I was interested in things I was interested in. They just weren't giving me grades on those things. Right. And the things they were grading me on, I wasn't really interested in. So, how do you then decide to continue to learn? Do you go to college? What's your kind of next
Yep.
step? And ultimately, how does that lead you into your professional career?
So that's a perfect segue because I literally dropped everything and changed my name and left like overnight. So,
When you graduated from high school?
yep. When I graduated from high
Mhm,
school, I knew one thing. I was going to college, and it was going to be far away. And
mhm,
I applied to, let me think back, Arizona State. Kind of, they look good. The pictures look cool. Uh,
mhm,
and I ended up going to SMU in Dallas, Texas. And I did
mhm,
that because my older sister Renee she's 2 years older than me, and she was already in school there. And she convinced me to come down and visit. I had a good time. Quickly found out that SMU's in the Highland Park area and a little bubble in uptown Dallas, really cool
mhm,
area. Um, and had a good Greek life. The fraternity, stuff was interesting to me. I was looking forward to going to college to party. Also,
mhm,
I
mhm,
was a partier. I was a drinker.
mhm,
Um, not anymore. We'll get to that eventually. But
mhm,
but that was what the kind of draw was. And I also was sick of being Ricky. I was
mhm,
Ricky Reichert, Ricky Reichert, Ricky Reichert.
mhm,
Everybody called me Ricky. And the second I would say Ricky Reichert, someone would say, "Oh, Fred's son, Fred's son." So it was
mhm,
either Ricky
mhm,
or Fred's son. I didn't like either of those names.
mhm,
So I wanted to get away. So I went to Dallas, Texas. I dropped the Y. I became Rick Reichert, and kind of got to just almost start kind of figuring out who I am at the same
mhm,
time as I broke away from that being in the
mhm,
bubble of my parents' life.
mhm, mhm.
A lot of people do that, but it was pretty extreme because they aren't known in Dallas, Texas.
Right.
Occasionally, you would see somebody that would notice the dealer tag and the Reichert sticker and go, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm from Columbus. Like we're dealing." And like, "Yeah, that's
Mhm,
my dad. Awesome,
mhm,
good to see
mhm,
you."
mhm,
So
mhm,
went down there to break away for a few years. Did the fraternity life as expected, and switched degrees a couple times, and ended up um, doing marketing at the end. And wasn't quite to a graduation point when my dad actually convinced me to move to South Florida. This is right in 2001
mhm,
when they sold their house in Gahanna. He was gonna snowbird, but then he found a house they fell in love with, and my three younger brothers and sisters were all in like middle school age at the time, so they decided to move. And he
mhm,
called me up and he said, I'm gonna have to do my work, my business from down here. I got to set up a studio and an office. Will you come down here and like help me out? I think it was also kind of him going, I want to get him out of Dallas because I wasn't
mhm,
really going anywhere, but I was having a
mhm,
ton of fun, like a
mhm,
lot of fun on his dime. So he was ready to something else. And living in South Florida, I found a school after jockeying around a couple community colleges, which were awesome, by the way. South Florida has some of the best schools in the country. Even
mhm,
Palm Beach Community College was awesome because
mhm,
the professors came
mhm,
from Michigan and
mhm.
Northwestern, and they were older and they were sick of the snow, so they wanted to live in
Right.
South Florida. So they got a job and they were great teachers. And then
Mhm,
I ended up finding a school called Northwood University, which is the only school in the country to offer a degree in automotive marketing and management, how to run a car
interesting.
dealership.
Wow.
And they have a campus in West Palm Beach, and that worked out great for that post grad year. I spent a
Mhm,
year in West Palm, which is not quite. So what's important with that part of the story is the summer before I found that school was my first summer actually being an employee of our company. So there were previous instances through my teenage years where out of punishment, I would get sent to the mega mall. I
mhm,
would break curfew, grades or something, and my dad would say, until I can figure out what I want to do about this, you need to go down and check in with Tom, who's the head of maintenance. They're painting
mhm,
all the light poles today. You're gonna paint light poles in the sun for the next 10 hours. And I do that. I come to Mega Mall and work, and I would kind of take my punishment. But then it was in the summers in college where I finally was like, hey, I want to, I'm going to get a job in the summer. And my dad's saying, well, do you want to, you want to do maintenance? No, actually, I'm going to do something I can make some money. I want to make money so I can have more spending money in school. He says, do you want to sell cars? Sure. So I'm 20 years old. I start selling cars, and I was average. I was a little, above average, had good energy. I kind of learned it, but on a commission-based pay plan, I could do good. I could do well enough in 3 months to have enough spending money that it would last me, the year of school, basically. So I had enough knowledge under my belt. And before I walked in that first day, I didn't know that people signed up for payments on cars. I thought everyone wrote a check. I had no idea how any of the financing worked or anything until I was 20. And of course, learned it because I started selling. And then when I walked into Northwood University on my first day, and I signed up for a year of all 12, they're on trimesters, all 12 of the automotive classes. I'm in a classroom and there's 22, 23 other car dealer kids, we'll put it that way. There's a lot of family car dealerships, and there's a lot of succession and generations of dealers. And so I walk in this classroom, and some good looking group of kids, or hear them chatting and talking, and the teacher starts asking questions. And to be honest with you, it was not a very impressive group. When I started hearing them intellectually and hearing about some of their backgrounds and things, it kind of hit me that, hey, wait a minute, every one of these kids thinks they're gonna become a car dealer. They're gonna get the keys to this dealership, and this is what my competition is gonna look like. I'm doing this deal because this is the weakest competition I've ever seen. So that was my initial mindset of motivation of like, I'm going to buckle down and learn this car dealership. I'm going to learn the car business. So,
yeah, let me just hop in there for a second, because you said a couple of things I just want to better understand. You said that you're there, you're partying, you're having a good time, which is not an uncommon part of college. Especially in the frat world. I did that too, and the party for me was really the best part about college, and really took up a big part of my college experience too. And what I love about the party is I learned a lot. And I got a whole different kind of education, which is the one that actually really served me incredibly well. So I get it. But at a certain point, your dad says, come to Florida, and you leave the party, and then you kind of find your way towards this program that's gonna put you into the family business. And I'm wondering, you went from Ricky to Rick to in a few years coming back around to get really fully into the business. I'm wondering, what were you thinking at that point? How did your mind change? Because there was clearly I want to get away, but then at some point, do you see actually, it's my family, and I don't know, what was it that kind of got you to go to Florida and get into the business? What drew you there?
I think it had to do with the process of elimination more than anything, because when I first went to Dallas, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew they had a good business school. So do I take, business classes as a major? Thought about engineering at one point. I was all over the board. I had no idea what I wanted to do. By the time I got to Florida and I was a year in down there, my actual love for cars increased, because South Florida has some, really cool cars you don't see. Actually, you see more of them in Columbus now. There's a bigger kind of supercar, exotic car, cool car scene in Columbus today. There wasn't one 15 years ago. Anyone in Columbus that really had those type of cars, they weren't bringing them out for car shows. They were real private about it. You didn't see them valet parked outside Morton's on High Street before they closed that. Miss that place. But they,
just let me just hop in there for a second. And I don't want to get off subject, but I still find that that's true. And I have a flashy red sports car, that I am not comfortable driving anymore because of a few things that have happened to me.
Yeah.
And I still think, we're not South Florida. Columbus still looks at people and exotic cars and decides, all kinds of things about that person.
Yep, you're exactly
Yeah.
right. Columbus, I mean, it's part of why, some of the dealers in town have taken the tact of buying the luxury brands and they go out to the luxury stuff. We're a Ford truck, now Chevy, GMC truck, Nissan truck, fleet and commercial truck business, Central Ohio, Southern Ohio. That's really what the core of the people are. It's a lot more, you know, I hope one day to get this high trim level Ford F-150. That's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the demographic kind of wish list, if you will. There's not as much of, gosh, one day I can't wait to have a turbo Porsche in Columbus. Now there are those, but so yeah. So the car scene in South Florida kind of sparked something. We'll keep those cars down there. And the other options were kind of falling off the list. At one point in time, I did a lot of theater in college. I did theater in high school. I did theater in college, did musicals. Thought maybe Hollywood might call. Dreams of the NFL died after high school, right? I mean, all those grandiose illusions that we had as an 18-year-old of, do I want to be a professional athlete, a comedian, president of the United States, and you have all these options out in front of you. And then by the time you're in your fourth year in college, people pointing the finger at you going, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? What do you do when you get out? And people are figuring those things out. And I got friends that are making plans for internships and all that. And that's what kind of goes back to, me getting my foot in the water by just wanting to sell some cars to make some money, and went in without any pressure. Like, I didn't make a decision. I wanted it to be a career, and not having that pressure, it kind of made me lighter on my toes. And I had fun doing the job because, kind of like in Tommy Boy, whether they say yes or no to the chicken wings, I got a meat lover's pizza in the trunk. And I had that kind of jovial attitude about it that allowed me to have some fun on the job. And then, when I finally decided, and I really didn't even decide, like when I mentioned I went into the classroom, and that's when I made the decision. I didn't enroll and register in that school thinking that's what I want to do. I literally was buying another year in South Florida because my dad was offering, do you want to take a post-grad year, stay down here another year, and live in West Palm before you move back to Columbus? And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to take another year to think about this in West Palm Beach. That sounds great. So I did that. And then through the education at Northwood and starting to learn the business and meeting some of the people is what made me realize that the car business is really cool. And being a car dealer is entrepreneurial as it gets. Every part of business we get involved in every day, whether it's advertising, sales, finance, accounting, merchandising, floor plans, banks and finance world, you name it. Every single aspect we kind of touch, and we get to play with all of it. And I get bored easy, and I've got ADHD worse than anybody. I'm thinking of 15 different things right now, and this business is perfect for me. You have to be slightly abnormal.
Well, one of the things that I just had this discussion on another episode we recorded where the guest said that work is work, and you do your things you're passionate about on the weekends. And then he also said something like that his success brought him to passion. And that's just not my belief. I just don't believe in either of those things for me personally. And what I found to be interesting, and just kind of hearing what you just laid out, is I also love cars. And these are like, boys, toys for boys, right? I mean, it's just, there's something in us, and it's not just, men, but that does have a childlike way of loving the toys, right? And so, I know you love motorcycles and all kinds of, cars and trucks. And I mean, it's endless. Right. And so I've actually thought in a past exploration that I'd like to own a car dealership. I'd like to be in that business. I'd like to, own all the exotic car, whatever's. And so what I like about it, and I think this isn't taught enough in the academic environments, is that you can really make a career out of the toys of life that you love to play with. Now, in your case, it happened to also be in your family business. But, when you talk about the being in South Florida and the love of the car, that's not just like, well, I'm going to stay down here in the sunshine and, drive fast cars. It's like you fell in love with cars and got to go into the automotive business, which means you get to go to work and do something you love. Now, I know it's not, all up and to the right and easy. I mean, the business is the business, but I think we should probably be teaching that more in an academic environment. And, that's what comes through in you.
It's almost like you got to reverse engineer your why, right?
Yeah.
Before you find it, you have to really think about it, and I obviously went through that Simon Sinek process a few years ago. Oh my gosh, might have been 6 or 7 years ago at this point. Read the book, What is Your Why? And we did the leadership training class. And this consultant says to me, have you figured it out? And I said, well, it can't be income or money. So it's really easy for me. I'm in a family business. It's my family. My family is my motivating factor. Family, family, family. He goes, I knew you'd say that. He flipped the paper over. He goes, I had the word family. I knew you'd say that. That's why you have to pick something else. I was like, what? So he gave me time to think about it. And one morning I leave my house. I live in Westerville. I'm coming down 270 over by Broad Street in the airport. And the night before, I took one of our Ford GT, 2006 Ford GT mid-engine V8 supercar, and I took it to a car show or event somewhere. Someone requested the car to go. So get up in the morning, I'm driving it to work. And as I'm driving that car into work, doing very close to the speed limit, this swarm of cars is surrounding me. Some younger, some older, a lot of phones out, big smiles on faces, and they're smiling and looking at me, and I'm like, oh, this is cool, but these are getting kind of close. I'm gonna have some fun with these kids. So I put the car in second gear and hit the gas, and within a quarter mile, I'm at 150 mile an hour. Boom, I get up fast and then slow back down, and you see them all scurrying to catch back up. And this swarm comes back around me, and their smiles are even bigger and taking the pictures. And that's when it hit me. It's like, my why is the Ford GT. These cars, and I have a picture on my wall of all 3 generations of that car. We have 3 generations of family business. The first generation GT, the 1965 to 67, were 427 cubic inch big block engines, naturally aspirated. The 0506 second gen cars are small block V8s supercharged. The third generation cars are V6 twin turbo EcoBoost, and they all have the same amount of power. It just shows that technology and innovation and progress. That to me is exciting, and I love innovation, progress. I love to design and grow and create things. The other thing with that car is we bought that car. We sell those cars. I can work on that car. We can modify that car. It's a commodity that literally, what's the difference between that and the used Ford Fiesta next to it? They're both 4 wheels, a body, an engine, a powertrain. But this car I'm talking about creates emotion. And the emotion that we can create in our business through our marketing, through our vehicles, our products, if we can't put emotion behind it, it doesn't have any interest to me. So that's why the Ford GT. And you mentioned the motorcycle world. I had the privilege of 3 years ago becoming America's oldest Harley dealer. I'm 42, but I'm America's oldest Harley dealer because the Faro Harley Davidson brand's been around now for this month will be 110 years. Longest continuously operating Harley franchise in the country. And that came out because, of all things, 6 years ago, I started working on a software project. I was going to build an operating system for car dealerships. We have very fragmented software at our disposal. There's 2 or 3 main DMS technology companies that all, anyways, and I'm like, why isn't there one great tool that can do all these things? I meet a company out of Cleveland. They agree to this revenue share plan, and let's build this software together. Let's develop software. I'm a year and a half into that project. A change in leadership requires a new contract. Negotiations go pretty bad. They ask for a big chunk of money instead of a partnership. And I'm driving home. I call my uncle. My uncle Rhett, by the way, is a pivotal part of my life. My dad stayed in Florida in 2001 or 2002. When I got out of school, my dad stayed in Florida. I came home, and my uncle was kind of my boss, my dad in Ohio, if that makes sense. So
I know Rhett a little bit too, and
yeah.
he's been generous with his time with me, and great guy, really great guy. Yeah, I like him a lot.
He's wise beyond his years. He's 65, and that dude is so deep with wisdom. It's unbelievable. And he's done a lot, and he's been around and got a ton of experience. So he's definitely a great sounding board for him. I'm really lucky. I got my dad I can call. I got Red I can call. I got some really good people. I got Bob, who's the former owner of the Harley stores, I can call. I got these great experienced businessmen all around me. If I can't keep people a lot smarter than me around me, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. I also have had the pleasure of getting to know Bob and doing business with Bob. And he's also a great guy and wealth of knowledge and wisdom. So you're right. You're surrounded by great people. Okay. Let me ask you something I was thinking about earlier, and kind of, a little bit of a transition into you as a human, as a leader of a business, as a leader in the community, as a father. I want to know, how would you differentiate yourself from your father? How are you similar, and how are you different? For starters, let's just start there.
Oh, I'm probably similar in more ways than I'd like to admit. As I get older, I can see some of the.
Funny how that happens, right?
I know, right? It kind of pisses you off too, but it's reality. Trying to think. I mean, a lot of the values and principles, big on family values. Gosh, how do I say it? I mean, my dad, for his age and where he comes from, it's really abnormal, but he's very open and equal. I mean, he was one of those people in my life that, like, I mean, everything when we went through in the summer of 2020 and Black Lives Matter and everything, and just made me think of my dad. Like, damn, that guy, man. I mean, he never sees color. He never saw anything other than people, and he loves people, and he loves bringing energy to people and bringing what he calls a tidal wave of positive energy.
Oh, it's great.
And it really is truth. And he would, and a lot like him, I can come out and interact with a stadium full of people, and I don't mind public speaking, especially if it's. I don't like being the recipient of things. If I'm doing it on the behalf of somebody else, or an organization or a charity, or if it can make our world a better place, and my projecting will help that, then I'm happy to play that role. But I also do like to have my home and private life also. My dad had a super private life that, he didn't leave the house a lot. His home was his castle. And if you wanted to get him out of the house, you'd have to drive him. You kind of still do this day. If you want to go to dinner with him, you got to go pick him up and put your shoes on. We're going, get in the car. He loved kind of being home, and I haven't quite hit that phase yet. I like to move. I like to travel, sporting events, concerts, especially. I spent some of those summers in college touring some bands around the country, and he was always a big proponent of that, because going back to music was always part of our house. Music is another big similarity. I am not 1/10 of the guitarist that my dad is. He is legit one of the best guitarists I've ever heard. He plays every day.
Does he still? Yeah.
Every day. He's 70 years old, and now he believes that's how he keeps his brain strong. He reads a medical journal every day, and he plays guitar every day and practices hand-eye coordination. Yeah. Because my grandfather, his father, died of Alzheimer's. So he is doing that. And he's a great bluegrass flat picker, just wonderful guitar player. But and when I was growing up, though, it was kind of forced upon me. At
Yeah.
one point in my life, I could play 17 instruments.
Wow.
Yeah, all the horns, all the strings. Um, Obviously, it's percussion stuff a little bit easier, but and it made it so it almost was a turnoff. Like,
Uh-huh.
and I was also a turnoff because when I went from Ricky to Rick,
Yeah.
playing guitar was my dad's thing.
Right.
I can play today. I can pick up a guitar. I'll play a few tunes for you, but
Mm.
I'm not going to play on TV. I'm not
Mhm.
going to carry it out in public. My
Mhm.
dad also almost used the guitar like a shield.
Mhm.
And when he had his shield on, it protected him and he was a lot more outgoing. You
Mhm.
take that off him and he kind of retracted, like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
the guitar to him was a tool in multiple ways. And but it brought the music into my life, and I understood more about the history of rock and roll and
Mhm.
classic rock from the 60s and everything. And he always
Mhm.
played and pushed all that, everything from that stuff to ZZ Top, AC/DC, and heavy metal came from my dad. And he
Mhm.
and he and he loved it all, which has led to my love of kind of diverse jam band music now and stuff that
Mhm.
pays homage to the old stuff, but will also take you into modern times in the future. And I love
Mm.
like improvisational music, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Okay, so tell me
so yeah,
now.
sorry. So
Yeah,
music,
yeah,
yeah,
that no, that's
music.
great. It's great. And so tell me a little bit about you now. Kind of I don't know, who are you? What are you up to? What do you do? We were talking a little bit before we started about, kind of grounding and
Yeah,
what kind of spiritual practices you have or different modalities you're into. I mean, I know that this kind of side of you that people might
yeah,
not know, and so
yeah.
talk a little bit about kind of how you're living your life as being all those things.
The grounded day. Let's talk about the grounded day. I'll take you there real quick. So the only thing I'm missing from the whole part of what we've been talking about was that summer before I went to that school is the summer I met my wife. And if she
Mm.
listens to this and I don't throw a shout out to her at that moment, then none of this matters.
Nope.
I
Smart
met
man.
her, dated back and forth. And that's important because I kind of put her through hell. Because
Mhm.
from 24 to 31, I was really trying to find myself. And at the same time, didn't really realize it. I was also battling alcoholism. And I didn't have the wherewithal yet to figure it out. And I say 24 to 31 because at 24 was my first red flag. And the first summer or the second summer that we were dating, I got my first DUI.
Mhm.
And typical, I go out, friends, drink at the bar, drive home. Didn't make it home, got pulled over. I mean, saying that now sounds horrible. Like people, why would you take an Uber? Why? That's disgusting. Well, back then, there weren't Ubers. You try to control how much you drank and you go home. And the problem was I
It was
wasn't
a
able to
different
control it.
time, no question, no
Different time.
question.
And
Yeah.
but as I live today with the rule of I don't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, all of those events made me who I am today. And I'm
Mhm.
extremely accepting of them because that path, get this, I'm dating her, trying to convince her to marry me and all that stuff while I'm going through these DUI phases. Had three of them actually. And the last one, which was June 10th, 2011, was the one that really basically scared the crap out of me. And I
Mhm.
was in a dealership training program in Washington, D.C., where
Mhm.
every other month you'd go to D.C. for a week, go through the training classes. Well, it's like-minded, others in their 20s, car dealers, kids, you name it. You go to the class all day, then you go out at night, you go to dinner, you drink, bars, the cycle. And like, long story short, I didn't make it home from that trip. I was arrested before I even got home, and it scared me because I had no intention on drinking and driving. The car
Mhm.
was in the hotel valet. I didn't, all I had was a valet card in my wallet and nothing else. And for some reason, somehow, in a night where I don't remember, I got the car out of valet and tried to drive home. And that
Mhm.
just scares me. That scared me so bad that the next morning I knew how to make a change. And up to that point in my life, I always really tried to be nice to other people. I was never a mean person. Um, but I wasn't really giving back and I wasn't truly working with others and helping others yet in my life. I had to learn that through the AA program. I went to
Mhm.
I went to Shepherd Hill in Newark, Ohio. Spent
Mhm.
65 days there, learning the program, who I was. I got to spend 40 days in the Licking County Jail.
Mhm.
You want to have some time to really reflect and think. Jail, they call it doing time, and that literally is the worst part. It's awful, and I really have no interest in going back there again. So that
Mhm.
helped me confirm my decision to say I need to stop. I need to stop drinking. My
Mhm.
health improved, all these other things improved in my life. But the gift I was given wasn't just sobriety, it was spirituality. And through
Mhm.
working the steps, I found my higher power, which I choose to call God, and I work on that relationship. And one of the big, um, especially for someone like me that needed extra help, service work is something that was pushed on me in the beginning. You get to meetings early, you help set up, you put the books away after, you read if they ask you to read. And I was kind of taught this rule that if somebody asks for you for your help and you have the means and the capability of helping them, say yes and then figure it out.
Mhm.
And I started doing that. I started living by that. And that's when I, um, shortly thereafter, become a father. My first
Mhm.
child's born, Elizabeth. She's going to turn 8 here in a couple weeks. And I got this healthy child, and then another one came, and another one came. And through this time, I'm learning who I am, and I'm trying to learn how to be a better person, all this stuff about spirituality. And um, then these opportunities start coming right when I'm thinking, what else could I do? And
Mhm.
one day, my good friend Michael Crotty knocks on my door, and he comes to my office, and he says, "Hey, I want to give you this information on this organization called A Kid Again, and I
Mhm.
really think this is something that you could help out. They're a small organization. They don't have a lot of advertising or marketing. Their share of voice is kind of low, and I've heard the name, but I didn't know what they did, and that was kind of the way a lot of people were responding. Says, will you join the board on this?" I had never joined the board of anything. I'm like, other than automotive, I do dealer advisory board and industry type things. But now I have an organization in the city of Columbus reaching out, asking, can I help?
Mhm.
One of the things I've learned from my father and my uncle throughout the years is they were philanthropists, but they were anonymous philanthropists. I'm not sure why some of the donations and things throughout the years, they never wanted um, the credit and things like that. My theory is and still is, instead of just giving direct money, if I can work with organizations to raise awareness and to educate and to help them on an even bigger level. Sure, could I write a
Mhm.
check for 5 or 10 grand and here, don't put my name on this and then go away? They might
Mhm.
turn that money into something good, but it doesn't help raise the awareness.
Mhm.
And now I like to get involved and do those things and then promote fundraisers. Instead of me giving a check for 10 grand, I can spend 5 to 10 grand of our marketing dollars
Mhm.
and do some stuff off and help raise 100 grand. So there's
Mhm.
a way to do those things bigger and better. And it all goes back to what I've really kind of learned as my watchwords for living, which is I try to make my world a better place.
Mhm.
What I can influence and what I can touch every day, right? It starts in my home with me and how I improve myself every day. And I wake up every day at the same time. I have the same routine. Physical exercise is important, pray, meditation. And I usually, until the kids went to school at a school so earlier, I could get all those things done before my family even woke up.
Mhm.
My day's done. Rick's day is over before anyone else I
Mhm.
love even wakes up. Because
Mhm.
once they wake up, it's their world. How can I make their world a better place? How, and not just, I don't mean spoiling them, but how can I culture them? How can I teach them? How can I treat them to make their world better? And then outside my home, whether it's my community that I touch every day, whether it's the business that I can impact, whether it's the city of Columbus. And if for some reason something that I do has an action that makes people even outside of Central Ohio, makes their world a better place, then that's even better.
Mhm.
So, trying to control not just the 20 square feet around me, but how can I impact as much as possible on a daily basis? And
That's great.
yeah,
Hey, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I'd like to just maybe back up and have you expand a little bit because I think it's really important
yeah,
on the alcohol piece, the addiction,
sure.
and um, and talk maybe a little bit about 12 step and your recovery. I think it's often still stigmatized,
Yeah.
and people um are getting better. I think maybe it's just my little bubble, but
Yeah.
there's less maybe than there used to be. But I don't know what it was like for you when you realized that you were an addict and needed help, and then turn to 12 step. I actually have come to learn that there's probably not a more successful program or modality than the A groups, right? To getting people sober. So it's funny to me they get such a bad rap, and I don't know if it's the higher power thing or whatever it is, right? But that's even misunderstood. So talk a little bit about kind of what you learned about yourself, and kind of um, my belief is like, wasn't your fault. So, talk about kind of what happened and what you've learned, and the role that 12 step played, because, maybe there's one person out there listening to this who might need some help.
Yeah. And if they're out there and they want to message me, call me, email me, that's what the 12th step's about. It's about working with others and giving the gift away. Actually, I think earlier in the interview, I even used the words God is my God of my understanding. And I use that because the word God does freak people out.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're atheist, agnostic, or you're non-Christian religious, it doesn't matter. And that's one of the first things that I always say. The AA program is a spiritual program. It's not a religious program. And they just kind of choose to use those three letters of good orderly direction, or a group of drunks, or whatever you want God to stand for. And there's a way to look at that. I never thought I had a problem. I have a cousin who's my business partner, Jared, who's awesome, and I'm not going to expose too much of his anonymity, but he walked a path before me, and the path that I saw him walk, I was different. I didn't think I was on that same path. And then when I had to have that realization the morning after my final arrest, looking in the mirror, crying, going, what the hell's wrong with me? It's when it hit me. You know what's wrong with you. You've been fighting it. You've been in denial. You're an alcoholic. And I called my cousin and said, I want to go where you went. Tell me what you did. And I was lucky enough to have someone that I could reach out and help me immediately. And a lot of people don't have that today. I love the fact the stigma is falling. There's a saying in AA, it's based on attraction rather than promotion. So technically, one of the laws of the program, you're not supposed to promote the program. However, to help with the stigma, I'm not very anonymous about it. And my life gets better the more open and honest I can be.
Mm-hmm.
And not just working with others, but talking to others and telling my story is a big part of that. In fact, there's different types of AA meetings. You have discussion meetings where you may need to read out of a book and discuss, but there's what's called lead meetings, where Hollywood, this is what Hollywood always shows, where you got the group of people sitting in the room and somebody up front, and they're telling their story and they start crying and everyone claps and they get down from the podium. That's not what it's like in real life, but it's a great way for me to share my experience, strength, and hope, and talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. And I share that, and I use my real name. And even occasionally I'll get called up to work with some other high profile people in Central Ohio that think maybe because of their status or their income or some kind of, that they're better and different, that they need to possibly call Passages Malibu and spend $3,000 a day because that's what they deserve, when it's not all they're going to, what they're really going to learn is it's about working with another. And it's a disease. There's nothing wrong with us. It's a disease. It's an allergy. It's an inception in the mind and an allergy in the body. And some people have obsessive thinking about drinking, or premeditative thinking, or they'll work all week and they think about what they're going to drink on Friday night. That doesn't make you an alcoholic. What it is it's when that mental obsession, then when you introduce it into the body, the physical allergy that you can't stop. And it's the American Medical Association. When I was in treatment in the summer of 2011 is when the AMA came out and said, yep, alcoholism is a real disease. Addiction is a real disease. And the way I look at it, my AA meeting I go to every Monday night off of East Broad Street is my treatment. And I go in there and I get open and honest, and I get to vent a little, and I've got like-minded now or friends and family in the room. And people I'm very, very close to have been through the same thing, can give me great feedback and share their experience. And then it resets my spirituality. And I need that sometimes.
Yeah.
I need that big time. And it sucks too. They happen in churches. Not all AA meetings are churches. Sometimes the church scares me away. No, they're going to bring me into this church and stuff God down my throat. And that's not, it's not at all. It's a room off the side of the church, and no one in that room cares at all what your religious beliefs are. There's nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying all that and really sharing. And this is why I love doing this podcast, is because there's probably a lot of people that don't know that about you. And people create all kinds of stories, especially if in your multi-generational business, and they don't understand there's a human being on the other side of that commercial that's just like you, that is going through life and finding it to be hard, really hard sometimes, and navigating through it, and so, I love kind of being in that with other people, because it feels very real, and relatable, and hopefully other people will hear that too. And I know that you are sharing that, openly with the world, and that's how we help each other. I think you're right about it's about being together in this, getting out of the dark into the light, sharing experiences, connecting and supporting each other. And boy, I think, you're a phenomenal example of that. So I really give you a lot of credit, and appreciate you sharing.
And I really appreciate that. And actually, I feel bad for, and I can't relate to young women, but I work with a lot of young men that are in their 20s, and what social media has created with pressure and these deadlines that they're making up in their heads for success and things they need to achieve is putting additional pressure. I got to tell you, my 20s were the hardest 10 years of my life. Growing in the 20s as a young male, I didn't know who Rick was yet. Hell, I didn't know if I was Ricky or Rick or who that guy was or what that meant. You want everything, but nothing comes yet. You have to have incredible patience, and then all that kind of changes it. I don't, what I mean. It's just the pressure on the 20s is awful.
Yeah, it's very hard.
My
I
message to
agree.
that would be
Yeah.
patience. Everything happens when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Keep striving
Yeah.
for something, and don't let the pressures of stuff. And if they do take you too far, there are absolutely places to go. There's friends everywhere that want to help you. There's a lot of good people in this world that have their arms out. Just if you open your eyes and look for them, they will appear.
No, I think it's a really important point. The 20s. You shout out your wife, and I'll shout out mine. Talk about patience. I mean, I got married when I was 24 years old, and trying to figure life out, being working a career, starting a business, a dad, a husband, whatever else. Man, thank God for our wives, because it is a really, really hard time. For everybody, for women and for men. And with men, there is a lot of generational conditioning and stuff that I think men have a harder time often really being honest about and open about. And I don't want to stereotype gender, but I have also met a lot of men that kind of share that same story and belief. So it's just my experience. But let me ask you one last question on the addiction piece before we start to wrap up. How do you feel about kind of addiction? I know you're sober, but you talked about social media, and there's all kinds of socially acceptable addictions, right? Work, busyness, social media, pornography, food, sugar, right? Venture, whatever it is. Some may be healthier than others, right? Some aren't going to blow up your life, and some, might even be good. But I'm curious, what's your thought about, the kind of, concern that you hear a lot about whack-a-mole, that, you kind of kill one addiction, another one pops up. Tell me a little bit about your kind of how you've navigated through that.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Now that I think about it, one of the things I was taught was when you give up, when I gave up alcohol, I was giving up my best friend, right? Booze was my best friend at that point in my life. And that sounds kind of weird, but You think about the amount of time you spend together, how much you think about each other, and then this vacuum is created. And it's extremely important to fill that vacuum with other activities or hobbies, or trying to find something, other ways to pass the time. Because what I think what you're talking about is, then this time passes and you get bored, and it's like, well, let me, take this next thing because it's not the same as the thing I had a problem with, and kind of transitioning that around. I think the easiest one to talk about, that's most popular today too, is marijuana. And I'm an advocate of it, and I'm a medical marijuana card carrier. And what I was taught was, marijuana is not an addictive substance. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not pulling I have no opinion, but I was taught it's not an addictive substance. What I was taught in treatment is to give it a few years to learn the truly, completely clean me. I even didn't reintroduce caffeine for a few months, and really want to be as clean as I could and see how I felt. And then when the timing was right and I felt safe, I was kind of curious, and I decided to partake again, and it didn't affect my cravings for alcohol. It's something I can take when I want to or leave it. I don't have, it's not the same as what the alcohol was in my life. I think the whack-a-mole theory has a lot of validity to it, and people might jump to the next thing that might be. And what you got to ask yourself is it a bad thing or a good thing? If you replace alcoholism with a porn addiction, like, it's not doing the physical harm to your body like alcohol was, but it's definitely something that is, taking that sensory part of your brain that experiences euphoria, and it's trying to feed it with something else. So, and if you find yourself needing it certain times of the day, you can't stop or turn it off when you want to, or it's literally creating impact on your life in a negative way. You're missing out on things. You're losing people or jobs, or you're not making it to events because you're tied up in that thing. Then it's become an issue. And if I was in one of those situations, I would definitely look to reach out to somebody to figure out how to get help for that. Or like I learned in the A program, you do a 4th step, and you write down the inventory, and you figure out what's good and bad, and you go through those debits and credits, and you figure out what you have to do positively to reverse that. And that's a practice that takes a while. In the meantime, I think the biggest thing is awareness, acknowledge. The second something becomes having a negative impact in your life, it's worth looking at it and saying, I don't need that. Or anything in excess, right? If your thing's food, you love McDonald's, but you can't stop at 2 Big Macs. You need 3 or 4. There's help out there for that.
Yeah, that's good, Rick. Thank you. Hey, really appreciate the conversation, the time, again, all that you're doing in this community. Let me give you a chance for any final thoughts as we wrap up.
No, I would tell anybody listening, keep pushing the positive, keep helping this great community. Columbus is an awesome city. We're still considered young and growing. We have some great young leaders in this city doing remarkable things. Keep pushing the positive, and this will be a really cool place to live for many, many years to come.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That's a wrap.